Okay, here comes the usual question for this kind of situation. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Great. That's what we are always worried about when we work with this kind of platforms. So we're going to be talking about writing for publication, some generalities, things you should be familiar with, and feel free to interrupt me if you're unsure about something, if you need me to elaborate on something, or if you have any questions. Okay, first I would like to start with some visual metaphors for this process. And whenever we start writing, or whenever we want to start writing, we face this, and that's what we think we can handle. And we are sometimes unrealistic and even ambitious about what we want to do. Okay, let me check. I think someone else is asking to be in the meeting. Okay, so why do you think I have this picture? Why do I imply that that's what we think we can handle when we want to write? Any ideas?
Well, to be honest, I don't have any idea. I know that one way to organize our ideas is the brainstorm, but I know brainstorm, I mean, but besides that, I don't have any idea. Sorry.
Yeah, the point here is that we think we can deal with a very broad topic. So and this usually happens, for example, in a research course, and then students say, okay, I want to do research into English grammar, and that precisely is an ocean of topics. It's huge. It's impossible to handle. So what we can actually deal with is a teaspoon of water out of that ocean of ideas. That's the point of being concrete, being able to narrow down a topic. That's why I like to start with visual metaphors, because we think we can deal with lots of information, but it turns out it's not feasible. So the more concrete our topic, the easier it is going to be for us to deal with it and to write about it. Okay, so why would we want to write and publish our work? There are some reasons that are listed by Nixon. To help other people in similar situations, we need to think of our field. It's language teaching. It's also within the field of education, and we need to try to be nice to other teachers, and if we find something that may benefit other people, why not share it? And we can do that by publishing our work. We can improve practices if we do research and we find an alternative way of doing things. This is an opportunity to share it with the world. And also we can receive feedback from other people, because we may be we may have a narrow perspective, but some people may help us expand our vision and view things from another point of view, and contribute to the development of a discipline. We generate knowledge, and we share that knowledge with other people. We can establish networks of collaboration. Now it's easier to get in contact with people, just like we're doing right now. If it's common for articles to include authors' emails, and you can try and contact them and get in touch with them and exchange ideas. I don't know, can you think of other reasons why we may want to write and publish?
Maybe it could be to innovate, like let's say to share our ideas, because despite the fact that there are similar ideas from other researchers, uh, we might share a new point of view, let's say.
Yeah, that's right. And it's sometimes it's a bit difficult in our culture because in Costa Rica we tend to be individualistic and say, I don't want people to copy my ideas. This is mine. This is all mine, and it has my name on it. Okay, if you're so concerned about authorship or something belonging to you, well, why not get it published so you get credit for it instead of just keeping it for you and just use it with a limited group of people. But writing is not without problems, and I imagine most of us have faced one or all of these problems when we have tried to write. There's probably now we're lacking the time. We're overworked. We have to innovate. We have to adapt to this new way of working, and we have to teach online and study online. Sometimes we have too many ideas, and I like everything, so I cannot choose my priorities when it comes to a topic. We may suffer from writer's block. Okay, you start writing. Okay, but I don't have anything to say about this topic, even though I like it. Sometimes we're not sure about how to structure a paper because there are different types of papers. There are research papers, there are literature review articles, there can be book reviews, it can be essays, and so on. So all of them have their particular rhetorical features and structures. Sometimes we're afraid of criticism. But if we're not criticized, we're not going to be able to be better and to grow. And sometimes the criticism comes from ourselves, and we're overly self-critical. And say, what I write is not good. I'm not going to share this with anyone. This is not good at all. And sometimes you don't know where to send the paper. And say, okay, do I have to pay for my work to get published? Well, who would be interested in my paper? For example, we work in the field of English language teaching, okay, and sometimes we're unsure about where we belong. Is it part of applied linguistics? Is it part of education? Is it part of something else? It all depends on the focus of our paper. Have you experienced any other problems when trying to write?
Well, once I got a problem. Once I had a problem that somebody make a heavy critic uh, to one of my works, and then I feel like blocked at the moment to write my ideas or think my ideas because it was like any of my ideas was good enough.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to be criticized. Sometimes people may be tough and sometimes they don't know how to say things politely, and that's something that we have to deal with. And we're not going to be liked by everyone, and our ideas are not going to be liked by everyone. Still, we need to see, okay, is there anything I need to reconsider? Is there feedback valid? Is there any way in which I could improve my paper in any way? Sometimes when someone reads your paper and insert comments and then your paper is returned and you see, wow, it's a long list of comments, and that's discouraging at first sight. So sometimes when you look at the comments, some of them are, okay, there's a missing comma here, a misspelled word here. This comment does have to do with the content of the paper itself, so that's a major aspect to take into consideration. But sometimes when people see all the comments as a whole, they freak out and say, okay, no, I cannot handle this. Okay, so what can we take into account before writing? Okay, you need to be passionate about what you're writing about. You need to like it. Otherwise, it's going to be a painful process. So think of your own career or your professional goals, your values, something that really interests you. Think of what is needed in your field to offer a contribution. Especially in the field of education or pedagogy, do not ignore any phenomenon or problem you have identified in your practice. Okay, for example, whenever I have my students work in groups, something happens and there's this problem. So, well, probably you should study that and you should try to solve that problem, and that can be done by doing research. You may recycle old ideas, but they must be updated. For example, say, oh yeah, everyone has already written about this topic. Why would I even bother trying it? But, well, probably this topic needs to be reconsidered. And of course, a publication is the end of a process. First, it started as an idea. You started thinking about it. Then you started reading and you started doing research. And it's at the end that you start writing a report or a paper about a research or a study or a process. And sometimes we start the other way around and say, okay, I'm going to start writing the paper right away, but you don't have enough input, you don't have enough experience. So we need to be patient, and we need to persevere. Okay, so what do good writers do? Because no one writes a bestseller overnight. Sometimes you say, oh wow, this person has over 400 papers and books, and well, he must be a god or something. No, good writers develop consistent writing habits. If you don't develop a habit out of writing, then writing is going to be difficult for you. And well, and of course, this has to be adapted to your specific situation, and you need to see how much time you can afford to write. Is it are you going to be writing on a daily basis? Can you write once a week, once every 2 weeks? The point here is trying to be consistent and to do it regularly. Because if, for example, if it's for a course, so you have to turn in a paper, and then the day before you pulled an all-nighter, and then okay, yeah, I'm gonna get this done. Yeah, the result is not gonna be good, and sometimes you need to reconsider your own ideas. And for example, when you write, part of the information is on the paper, and the rest is on your mind. And when you read, you make the connection, and everything looks perfect. But then someone else reads your paper and say, and then the problems and the errors emerge. Or even if you let your paper rest for a few days, and then you come back and read it, and you say, oh wow, did I really write that? That doesn't make any sense. What was I thinking when I wrote that? So writing consistently and revising are also, well, revising is also important. So this needs to be consistent, and sometimes it's going to be difficult because developing a habit takes time. Or for example, you're writing your graduation project, your thesis, and sometimes something I used to tell my students in research courses, okay, keep a notepad by your bed, or if you prefer, use your cell phone. And if in the middle of the night you wake up and say, wow, I just got this good realization, I have this good idea, okay, write it down, or record an audio note. Okay, remember, this is very important, and we should reconsider this. And later you can go back to those ideas and they can be good input for you to write about. But then consistency is a key issue here. And good writers have special attributes that characterize them. According to Buttery 2010, there are 4 ideal attributes. That's desire. First, you need to want to write. Faith, you need to believe in yourself, even when you receive negative criticism. Be consistent, then persistent. If you don't succeed the first time, try again. And there's creative thinking. Okay, what can I offer? What is the problem to which my idea is the solution? So we need to think outside of the box sometimes. Actually, Buttery in his article describes some of the problems that he faced while trying to publish a paper. And for example, he sent the paper to a journal and it came back with lots of comments, and he got disappointed. And then he forgot about it, and the editor contacted him and said, okay, what happened to your paper? Please revise it and send it back to us. He did, and the paper was rejected. But then he sent it to another journal and it was published with minor changes. Probably that was not the right journal to send the paper to in the first place. Okay, so how can you start? Then you need to develop a plan. And I have this diagram, and it's just an idea, and it's adapted from Villarreal et al. So, well, determine the focus of your topic. That has to do with the ocean versus the teaspoon of water. Okay, try to be concrete, specific, be innovative. Don't write about what has already been said. Try to think outside of the box. Once more, publishing something is the end of a process. So you need to review the literature exhaustively. You need to search in various databases, sources of information. And then you need to identify the topic, okay, what it is that you want to write about, search internationally, locally, find as much information as you can. And you need to make your topic attractive, provide an added value. Sometimes something as simple as your title will discourage possible readers for your paper. So Buttery, once more, recommends following a basic approach. So we need a good title. It should not be too short. It should not be too long. In general, if we think of standard regulations or recommendations, about 15 words or so. It's not that it's written in stone, but a title that long is good enough, but it has to be descriptive enough. It has to be clear enough so people can identify what point you're going to be making in your paper. Most readers will discard the paper after reading the title. If the title seems to be promising, they will continue reading the abstract. And then the abstract has to be good as well. If the abstract is not clear, then they will discard the paper and they will not continue reading it. The introduction is also important. You need to be clear about what your topic is about, what is the point you're going to be making. If it's an essay, okay, what is the main argument that you will propose and defend in this paper. You could also let your readers know about the general structure of your paper, the topics you're going to be covering. And that also has to do with the principle of organization. Another reason why papers are disliked or rejected is because they look like a continuous piece of prose and there are no headings, so readers get lost. So try to have a clear structure of headings so people can clearly see the rhetorical structure of your paper. Help them, guide them. We have limited attention spans. So yeah, headings and transitions. How do we move from topic A to topic B? We need something in between. And sometimes we read a paper and it's all fragmented, so it's hard to process. So we need to find a way to provide smooth transitions. So we move from one part to the next one. And then references. You need to be familiar with the format that you have to use. For example, if it's the APA format, the MLA, have Chicago, Vancouver, and some others. So you need to be sure that you're using the required format and that you're using it consistently. It's also important that every entry you list on the list of references is cited in the body of the paper, and vice versa. And Villagrand and Harris give 3 secrets for being an author. So secret 1, look professional. What do they mean by that? Okay, make sure your paper is impeccable. Revise it, proofread it, make sure there are no typos, that it is well punctuated, that you're using the right format. Because something as simple as format can be annoying, and sometimes papers are rejected because, okay, yeah, it is, even though it's good, it is full of typos, and although typos may not be that important, people tend to judge people's intelligence because of minor things like that. For example, think of pronunciation mistakes. We could be talking to someone who is actually smart, and then say, okay, but there are lots of pronunciation mistakes, and say, okay, and we start judging people because of superficial aspects like those. So we need to make sure that people are not going to use that against us. And how do we also look professional? Okay, look for articles or papers that are similar to the one you want to write, and say, okay, how did the author structure the paper? Look at the system of headings. How does the author deal with transitions? Or if you want to send your paper to a journal, look for some of the latest papers that have been published and say, okay, what do they look like? Is there a way in which I can adjust my paper so it looks like those? That way you will look professional. Then choose your message well. Again, this has to do with a teaspoon of water. So make sure that your topic is concrete enough, that the point you're making is clear enough. Because sometimes you read, especially, I have seen this problem very often, especially in research papers. So you read and say, okay, I have 2 general conclusions. They did some research and they found something, but I don't know what those are. It's not clear. So it needs to be descriptive enough. Actually, they conducted a research study about research papers, and the papers that are quoted most often are those that have the most narrative elements, especially in very abstract fields. It could be physics, it could be astronomy, and sometimes the discourse in those disciplines is so abstract that it's hard to digest. So when authors include narrative elements and make the content accessible to the reader, then it's really helpful. And even if it's a paper written for a very specific discipline and we have very specific terminology and stuff like that, if the way it is written is not accessible, then chances are people are not going to like it. That's why secret 3 is be in your reader's shoes. So help your readers. Remember, we have limited attention spans, and sometimes papers are extremely long. They are very wordy and redundant. So we need to make sure that every word that we write counts. Okay, then after all that, I say, okay, yeah, I have thoroughly revised my paper. Okay, everything looks good, everything is in order. Okay, now I need to choose a journal and send my paper. But there is a process that we need to follow and that we need to consider. So here are my tips too. approaching the publication process. Okay, always consider your prospective readership. What does readership means? What does readership mean? Your audience. So that's why I previously gave the example of English language teaching. Where does it belong? Linguistics, applied linguistics, education. It all depends on the focus of your paper. So who would be most interested in reading your paper? So you need to find a good match for your paper. So don't just send your paper to any journal that you found. So make sure that your paper fits within the journal's scope and topics they cover. Again, do not become obsessed with a journal in particular. For example, you send it to a journal and say, yeah, they really have to publish my work. No, they don't. If your paper does not belong, and it should be sent elsewhere. For example, I am the editor of a journal in education. And for example, a couple of months ago, I got a paper about a parasite that attacks dogs. Okay, and the author insisted on sending this paper to the journals, and I told him, okay, please, I need you to understand that we are a journal in education, and your paper has nothing to do with education. Actually, the university has a journal that specializes in veterinary medicine, so your paper should go there. Right, once more, revise. So, for example, you may send your paper, and it gets reviewed, and it's sent back with lots of comments and observations, and then you get disappointed. Many people give up at that time, so you need to make sure that you continue with the process. There are three things that could happen after the review process. One is that your paper is rejected. Another possibility is that it is accepted without any changes, but that rarely happens. The third option is that it is accepted once you make the necessary changes. And sometimes people get disappointed and they give up. For example, I remember the case of a student from a master's program. She sent a paper to the journal, and it was revised. And an important piece of advice that was given was to update the literature, because most of the sources that she had were from the 90s. And well, we're in the 21st century. A lot has happened. And then we got no reply from her. Later, I met with her and said, okay, what happened? And say, oh, you told me that my paper was not valid. Really? When did we say that? We told you to update the sources. You're basing your paper on documents from the 90s. We need you to do a little research and see what else has been written about this topic. But in the end, she didn't do anything, and well, that was her choice. And that has to do with the next tip: rid yourself of your own arrogance. Sometimes say, okay, why do I have to change my paper if what I wrote is good, if what I wrote is perfect? Sometimes we're very arrogant and we're not willing to accept criticism coming from other people. Okay, the criticism may not be valid, but we need to be willing to consider other points of view and see, okay, is there any way in which I can improve this? Did I not take into account this other position? Something important here: beware of plagiarism and any other kinds of scientific misconduct. For example, last year I rejected 40 papers because of plagiarism. And it was not just a minor thing. Those were serious cases. This year, I have rejected 20 papers because of plagiarism. So that's a major concern when you write. So make sure that you're quoting information and you're giving credit the right way. And even if you do, sometimes you see papers with lots of these big block quotations. Even if they are done the right way, that's not the the most pragmatic way, the most appropriate way of dealing with information. So textual citations should be reserved for ideas that cannot be expressed better in different words, for wording that is insuperable. Otherwise, paraphrase the information. And of course, never fabricate any piece of information. And sometimes when papers are rejected because of plagiarism, say, but I didn't do anything wrong. The problem is that ignorance is not an excuse. And if we find something wrong and we have evidence to prove it, the paper will be rejected. And sometimes, well, you may not be aware that self-plagiarism can happen. So for example, if you don't quote your own work the right way, that can also be an instance of scientific misconduct. Then you should also be patient. Sometimes they submit the paper, 2 weeks later they are telling you, okay, where is my paper? I went to your webpage and I don't see the publication. Okay, that's not the way it works. And be perseverant. If your work is criticized harshly, or if it's rejected right away, then keep trying. Probably that was not the right journal for your paper, so you need to consider sending the paper to another journal.
Professor Juan Pablo?
Yes.
I just have a comment about this part about being perseverant. Last year, some of my students who were in the bibliographic research course, they sent a paper to Revista Ensayos Pedagógicos. The first time they sent it, they got a few observations. They corrected those observations, right? And then, you know, as far as I understand, their paper is going to be published soon, right? So if it's a matter of not giving up, right, when you face...
Right now we're working on the last details about this paper. We also, there's some paperwork that we have to go through when we need to ask for some permissions so that we can publish the paper, but that is almost ready. And I hope the first issue for this year is published at the end of this month. I hope there are no complications.
Okay, yeah, I hope so too. No, I was just giving the comment because there are a lot of students here, and many of them are taking, you know, research courses right now. It's, you know, they have to see this talk as an opportunity to send a paper, right, to Ensayos Pedagógicos or any other, you know.
And once more, that has to do with being patient.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the process, for example, from the moment you submit the paper until you see the publication, we could be talking about a year. Although, for example, I sent the paper to an international journal and it took 3 years to get published. Sometimes people get impatient, where's my paper? And of course, there are journals that publish new issues on a weekly basis, but they charge. Some of them, if you want to get your paper published in 2 or 3 weeks, okay, say, okay, in this journal, you can do so for $3,000. In this or other journal, $5,000. There's a journal in which you could get published in the same week for 9,500 euros. But I don't know how many people are willing to spend that money. I suppose it's better to choose an open access journal. Yeah, and that's another problem. For example, if it's a paper from a research team from a university, and they say, okay, yeah, we need to get that published in a mainstream journal. The problem is that the university has to pay for that 3 times. And why 3 times? Because the university is paying the researchers' salaries. The university is going to be paying the article processing costs. And if the university wants to have access to the journal, the university is going to have to pay for the subscription. So it's paying 3 times.
Wow.
Right now, well, for example, because of our current situation, in Ensayos Pedagógicos, we're inundated with papers. So right now, we're not accepting papers until further notice. Next year, I'll be communicating when we're going to be we're going to be accepting papers again. But right now we have more than enough for the rest of the year and the issues for 2022. I have one last note, and it's not the same to write a paper as the assignment for a course than to write a paper to be submitted to a journal. That's something that we see sometimes, and we get a paper and it has a cover that the student used for a course. Okay, that was good for a course, but for it to be a publication, it needs to be elevated to the next level. So it met expectations for a course, but that doesn't mean it's going to meet the expectations of a journal. So we need to keep that in mind. I'll share this presentation with you later on. We have references and all the links are active, so you can retrieve the documents. And I also have this extra resource. It was a book that it was published a couple of weeks ago, Writing and Publishing Scientific Papers. And if you click here and look for the PDF link, you can download the book for free.
Thank you, Juan Pablo. I'm going to be sharing that
So
information
now
with the audience.
I would like to listen to your questions, comments.
Okay, just a reminder for everyone, remember to sign the attendance, well, to complete it in this case, and let's open the space for questions now.
If I want to publish a paper, how many journals should I send it to? What is your advice?
Okay, good question. You can only send it to one journal at a time, because that has to do with ethics. You cannot do multiple submissions, because that could mean some serious trouble for you. So first, make sure you're making the right choice. Okay, based on the topic that I wrote about, okay, I think this, like journal A, is the best choice. But never do multiple submissions. Never ever do that.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor Garro. Any other question? What about from?
I have a comment.
Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Kevin, and also Juan Pablo for the invitation. It's great to be here. I just have a comment related to ethics that you mentioned before, because I know cases, unfortunately, of professors who work with students in a research course, even at the master's programs, and they supervise they are tutors, or they are just people reading the projects, and they offer the students to participate and polish the details about this product, about the final product that they could accomplish. And it results that the professor wants to be part of the publication, which is not really ethical. And that is something that students must understand, because I know, unfortunately, as I said before, I know some people that take advantage of those students who are not aware of those situations, and they say, okay, yes, professor, you just take care of the details, and you you just are going to fix the problems we had, and you're going to be part of the investigation, when actually they didn't do anything more than doing their job during the course. So that is important for students to take into consideration in the future. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's something what we call the guest authorships. So if we include a name in a paper, that means that person contributed meaningfully to the paper. If that person didn't do much, then that person should not be among the authors. And sometimes, yeah, that's very common among professors. So yeah, and actually there's a phenomenon called publish or perish. Especially there are some universities that are very strict in terms of publications, So if professors are not publishing regularly, they are fired. So they resort to those tricks. That's probably uh, one of the most unethical things you can do, and a horrible thing to do to a student. And sometimes they even place their names first, so they will appear as the lead authors. So it's like just stepping on the poor students. That's completely unacceptable. And there's a similar case called resorting to a ghost writer, not the Marvel Comics character, ghost writer with W. When someone writes a paper for you, and that's common among professors, and I've known cases about those. It's hard to identify. For example, I remember one of my professors who retired years ago, and well, he already got to the top of his career, and then and he wrote a paper with someone else, and they say, okay, you're already retiring, and why wouldn't you let me have just my name on this paper so I can get all the credit? And I was like, well, oh, what the hell, I'm going to retire, so do what you want. Or it also happens in the pharmaceutical industry, that they want to publish a study about the effectiveness of a new medication, or right now the effectiveness of a new vaccine, and they contact a famous doctor, a famous pharmacist, and say, we already have the paper written, so if you let us put your name on this paper and get it published, we will pay you this much. And there are people who accept this. Money talks, but that's highly unethical.
Very unethical. There's a question in the chat from Elena Celedon. It says, keeping in mind that we are students, which are some journals for us? Any recommendations that you have for students?
Well, once more, that has to do with the topic of your paper. For example, is it something that belongs to modern languages? Is it education? Is it educational technology? So, for example, all public universities have different journals. For example, our Universidad Nacional has 2 journals that specialize in education. There's Ensayos Pedagógicos and Educare. Educare focuses more on the actual research paper. As our name implies, we focus more on essays and argumentation. At UCR, you have Actualidades Investigativas en Educación. There's Revista Educación, Revista de Lenguas Modernas, Calidad en la Educación. There's Cañina, Revista de Lingüística y Filología. So it all depends on the focus of your paper. At least in Latin America, 99.9% of all journals are open access, so they will not charge you money for submitting your paper. So it all has to do with the topic of your paper, the nature of your paper. Is it an essay? Is it an actual research paper? Is it a literature review article? And see if your paper complies with their guidelines, and if there's anything that you could change so it complies with the guidelines. And of course, you need to be brave, because if you're going to be playing in the big league, you need to be willing to get kicked, because you will be treated like everyone else. So be willing to receive some rough play from the reviewers.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? I guess I have one. What are some good topics to write about, trendy topics in the case of English teaching?
Okay, once more, you need to be passionate about the topic you write about. So more than trends or fashions, I would write about something that interests me, or if I'm studying to become a teacher, okay, I should be writing about something that directly affects my praxis. Okay, like I don't know, whenever I teach, I see that there are socialization problems in my classroom, so that could be approached in a research, or um, I want to write about the meaningful use of educational technology. Okay, right now, yeah, we're even if we don't want to, we are forced to be a head floating on a screen, and as we teach our students. Okay, how do we engage our students in emergency online education? Because it was not a choice. This was not a choice. We were made to work like this, and we will pay the consequences in the years to come. We haven't seen the end of this. It's not going to end with a pandemic. We will see it in the future with the students that will come to the university, and students in high school, in primary school. It's not the same to be in front of a screen that to teach face to face. So probably lots of topics will emerge from when we are actually able to go back to normal face-to-face teaching. How do we approach remedial classes? I guess lots of remedial classes will be needed.
Thank you, Juan Pablo. Any other questions? Diego has another.
Yeah, I was thinking about the format because, well, when students have to write, we ask them to use APA, but I know that, well, depending on the journal, they ask you to do different things, right? You need to follow APA and some other things that are specific to the journal where you want to publish.
Yeah, in general, because we're within the humanities, most journals that we may submit papers to would follow the APA format. There may be just a few of them that they use Chicago, for example, or if it's like modern languages, they would probably use the MLA format. Sometimes a journal may accept more than one format, as long as you follow it consistently.
Any other questions? Okay, I have a question for everyone. Who is interested in publishing? I know there are some people working on some pieces of research already, so who is interested in publishing? Maybe you can raise your hand.
Well, in my case, I was thinking about it, but I don't know. Due to the semester that we're having right now, because of the teaching practical and all of that, we don't have the time to write a whole paper, right? You know, it is a process. What would you say, like, how much time should we take to to develop this, like taking into account that the semester coming and the one that we are in right now?
Yeah, I'm not a believer in recipes. So the point, as I mentioned before, is being consistent. So see how much time you can afford on a regular basis. Can you write daily? Can you write every 2 days? Can you write on a weekly basis? And you say, okay, if you start writing a little every now and then, you will say, okay, you will eventually have a complete paper. Of course, if it's a research paper, that will be a different story, because you probably have a specific time frame for developing or conducting the study. But if it's a literature review article, if it's an essay or some other kind of paper, consistency will be the key. Try to not to abandon the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I have a comment for Christopher. You already have something to start with, right? The paper you're writing in your bibliographic research course. As he said, it's what you publish is not the paper for a course. You need to polish it a lot more, but you already have something to start with. So it's not that you start from scratch, right? You should consider that as well. And
Okay.
from Maria Fernanda Venegas, it says, I have a question. Thank you so much for the information that you are sharing with us. First of all, I would like to know how difficult it is to process the process of publication, because I see it as something really difficult, a dream to reach. In fact, I would like to publish something in my life, you know? Well, she wants to know how difficult, you think that is going to be.
Okay, sometimes it can be variable depending on the journal. Sometimes it all depends on the reviewers. Sometimes it's uh, like like a lottery in a way. Sometimes the reviewers can be overly critical. Sometimes they can be overly indulgent. But yeah, there's a whole process. First, for example, you submit the paper to a journal. First, the journal is going to make sure that the paper meets the required criteria, that it belongs to the scope of the journal. They will probably check for plagiarism, and if they find something they don't like, they will say, okay, if it's something major, something serious, they will reject it right away and say, okay, sorry, please do not send this to us again. If it's something minor, they will probably send it back and have you correct it. Once more, that has to do with the secrets. Like, okay, try to be as professional as possible. So the more you refine your paper, the clearer you make it, then the easier it is going to be for you to get it published. So, for example, I have dealt with people and I have returned papers up to 5 times. And just because they don't know how to use the APA format, or they don't know what punctuation means, they don't know what tildes are, and stuff like that.
There's a comment from Catherine Hernandez. I wrote a book, Curios Infantes. This book won the last year in una palabra certamen. I think to write in English could be interesting. Okay, she already has experience of writing Spanish, right? That's very good.
So again, it's all about experience. So the very first time that you try this, it's going to be hard. Then, okay, as you become more familiar with the process, things are going to be easier. But then you need to get rid of your fears and try it at least once. There are people who dream about students, all students being able to publish something before they get their bachelor's degree. Of course, that's a very optimistic appraisal of the situation, but that would be good. Of course, there are discouraging factors. For example, right now, the Ministry of Public Education no longer gives points for publications. That used to be possible in the past, but that's part of the initiative for dismantling the public sector. And we're facing it right now with this project for the public sector.
What about the opportunities for professional development thanks to publications? What is your opinion about it?
Well, right now, you need to make sure you're as visible as possible. For example, so if you already published something, okay, make sure it is available everywhere online. So you can open a Google Scholar profile, Semantic Scholar, there's ResearchGate, Academia.edu, and some others. And you can also have an ORCID profile and your own page with your information. So the more you expose your work, the uh, the more chances you will have of being quoted or being contacted by other people. I have been contacted by a few people because of doing that. That's like trying to make my paper available everywhere. Even I was even I found something something unusual and actually motivating for me. I have a profile on Scholar Google, and I found Rebecca Oxford quoted me. I said, "Wow, I'm not worthy." Those were my 15 characters of fame.
Great.
But at least I got quoted by her.
Sure.
And that was because I made sure my papers are available everywhere. For example, I have a profile on ResearchGate and Academia, and I constantly get emails. Okay, yeah, two people read your paper. You got a new reader from Spain. You got a new reader from Saudi Arabia. I say, wow, this thing really works. And if you have something to share with other teachers, make it visible. So don't just rely on the journal's website. So use repositories, social networks, academic social networks.
I guess somebody has a comment. I hear somebody was going to talk. Nobody? Okay, Juan Pablo, thank you so very much for this opportunity. I guess we all appreciate it, and something that I really value is that, this is a Costa Rican, right, editor in a Costa Rican journal. So it's in Costa Rica, we believe that that knowledge is for free, right? It's a journal that is for free. You simply send what you want to send, your work, your research, and they're going to publish it for free, right? I guess that's something worth mentioning that we haven't mentioned up to this moment, right? So just
Yeah, actually, all Latin American journals will publish your work for free. So you just need to be willing to try. And if you don't succeed the first time, try again. Because sometimes when we read books or the chapters for the courses that we take at the university, sometimes it seems that we're only consumers of knowledge because we live in a banana republic, but we can also generate knowledge locally and share it with the rest of the globe.